Welcome to another episode of Healing Through Love. Each week, we share ideas, experiences, and resources to increase the awareness of domestic and family violence and to empower survivors to grow and thrive. We talk with experts who share their advice, or with people who have experienced abuse, no matter where they are on their journey. This is all about healing through love. And now, here are your hosts, Charlene Lynch and Rose Davidson.
Hello, welcome to the Healing Through Love podcast. I'm Rose Davidson, and together we're shining a light on hope, resilience, and transformation in the journey to end domestic violence. Each week we bring you inspiring interviews with changemakers who are survivors, advocates, and experts who are making a difference in the lives of those affected by domestic and family violence. Whether you're on your healing journey or supporting someone who is, this is your space for powerful stories, practical tools, and heartfelt inspiration. Let's heal through love. And today my guest is Perry Power, and we're going to be discussing the healing power of writing. And I'm really interested to hear what Perry has to share, because I think we can all learn about, journaling, writing, and getting out all our feelings on paper. So Perry is a global speaker. He's a best-selling author and a powerhouse in the movement to break the silence on abuse. He's helped thousands find healing through storytelling, helping them turn their pain into purpose. His raw, unfiltered approach has captivated audiences worldwide. And this conversation is just going to be a little bit different. So please welcome Perry Power to the Healing Through Love podcast.
Hello. I love the name. I think that healing through love, I think if there's any way that you can sum it up, we need more love in this world. And if you can step into love more, that's where you can find healing, for sure.
Absolutely. I totally 100% agree with that. Perry, tell me a little bit about your background and why are you trying to get people to heal through the power of writing?
So a bit about me and my background is that I went through abuse as a child by my step-granddad. It was sexual abuse, and it lasted for a while until my stepmom caught it happening when I was 11 years old. And she took me home. She told my dad. My dad spoke to me about it, confronted me about it. And he then told me to stay quiet. He didn't want me to tell anyone. And that was it. It was like case closed. And I then went on to live in silence. At the time, I didn't sort of consciously, from a deep-rooted nervous system level, I knew that what I was going through, my step-granddad was wrong. But sort of above the surface, he was someone that I looked up to. He was like the hero of my story. And I didn't really understand the full weight of what happened. My dad, in that moment, positioned himself as the villain of the story by telling me, don't tell anyone about this. You're never going to go around to your nan's house again. You're never going to see your step-granddad. But as the years went on, I'm 11, then I'm 12, then I'm 16, and I'm 18. I get older, boys being boys. I then understand what all these things are. I know what sex is. And then if I know what sex is, then I know what the sexual abuse is. And then I was then sort of confronted with what I went through. And sort of skip a few, I ended up, my dad, June the 1st, 2017, by this point, he had become an alcoholic. And he had become a diabetic. He had high blood pressure. And on June the 1st, he had a heart attack and he passed away. And he was 48 years old. And about 6 or so months after that, I broke my silence for the first time. And I always say that I broke my silence in 3 stages, because stage 1 was I broke my silence to my girlfriend that I had at the time. And then a couple of months after that, I broke my silence to a small group of people. And then I broke my silence for the 3rd time on social media to the world. And when I put that video out onto social media, that's where the snowball effect happened. And that's where it just blew up. And it kind of switched over from me sharing my story for me to then me share my story for other people, because it started to help people. But then that's where I found out, because my family watched the video, that it wasn't just me that went through that abuse. It was also my cousin, who I knew about, my auntie, and my dad was all abused by the same man. So then that's kind of like when purpose came bashing down on the door and said, Perry, you're going to help people break generational silence, because if it doesn't end with them, it's going to carry on going through that chain. And so then I just took it upon myself to try and do everything that I possibly could. I went viral on social media, grew a huge audience on there. And then I was like, what else can I do? What's next? What's next? And then I was 2 episodes into Jeffrey Epstein's documentary, and someone just spoke about like breaking the silence, or like they couldn't break the silence. And then for some reason, it just sort of like clicked. Why don't you write a book? Why not? Try it. You've never done it before. And I can hear the voice in there being like, but you've never done it before, so why would you even start? What are you doing? And I just sort of hushed it. And then I wrote my book, and I wrote it in 30 days, which is great. It's a good achievement. But I sat on it for a year and I didn't publish it because of the fears, because of the perfectionism. Oh, it's not going to be perfect. And a year later, I woke up, and it's the same sort of, I call it the fuck it moment. It's the same sort of fuck it. Like, fuck it, I'm going to write the book. Fuck it, just put the book out. Just do it. Just take imperfect action, put it out. And then I put the book out, and then it hit #1 on Amazon, which I had no idea. One, I didn't even really know about bestselling back then, because we're talking, uh, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. And I didn't even think about something being a bestseller. I just put it out there. And then it went into #1 in the sexual abuse category. And then I got press, news, everything. And then sometime after that, someone had asked me, Perry, I went through abuse. Can you help me write a book? And at the time, there was a lot of resistance, because I was like, I don't even know how I wrote my book. So if I'm going to help you write your book, that means I need to show you a process, or I need to show you something to help you write yours. And then I didn't say yes straight away. And I'm an actor, and uh, I'd always tried to begin with, I was following this traditional path of acting, where you have an agent, you go to auditions. But I didn't want to follow that path. I wanted to create my own path. And I never knew what that path was. And then one day I had a vision where I was in an office looking at screenplays, and I had this sort of weird connection to the screenplays, almost as if I had created them. And I didn't really understand what that was. And then one day I thought about that woman asking me to help her write a book, and then it all clicked for me how these screenplays, these true story films that I can see myself creating in the future, could come from true story books. So if I had a publishing company that can help trauma survivors write and publish their own memoir, then I will have a pile of true story books that eventually I can turn into true story films and help people even more. And that's when I went back to her and said, absolutely, I'll help you. We'll figure it out. And that was probably about 2.5 to 3 years ago. And then it was a year after me doing that book, I decided to go all in on this path. And that's when I launched Powerful Books, which is the publishing company. And now we have 20 books published. We're about to have 23. We've got 3 going through publishing at the moment. But now, so that's all the context. Now, to come back to your question, I launched this as a publishing company. That was it. Just like a publishing company, you know. And then it was after a handful of people went through it. And then they said they were the ones who said to me, Perry, this isn't a publishing company. I mean, yes, but it's not. This is a healing program, because my life has just changed. I've just gotten rid of my personal therapist. I've just gotten rid of my antidepressant medication because and I'm like, oh, holy shit. Okay, interesting. And then the more people that have come through it, we've got over 80 people in the program now. It's just mirroring the same transformations as before. So, and that's, now I'm in the middle of writing my next book called Story Medicine, about how our stories can be medicine for others. And within that, I'm talking a lot about something that I'm calling the witness effect, which is the 5 stages of healing. So we've got self-witnessing, which is when someone's living in silence about the trauma that they've been through. They can self-witness what they've been through. So rather than running away from it, they can witness it themselves. That's the first stage. Then we have community witnessing, which is then joining a community of other people that have been through similar, because then they'll realize that they're not on their own with what they've been through. Then the next stage 3, is page witnessing, which is when, for the first time, they unleash what they've been burying deep onto the paper, and they start to see their story unfold for them. And then stage four is as trusted witnessing, which is where they share their story, that truth, whether it's verbally or through the written word, with someone that they trust. And then the last stage is legacy witnessing, which is when they can decide to share their story with the world and start to create impact. So all of this has happened, which is crazy. It's how the universe works. Once I stepped into my own story and rode that wave and saw where it take me.
Yeah, I wish I was brave like you. I've often wanted to write my own story of my own sexual abuse, which happened with my father. He was the abuser. So yeah, and people have often said to me, Rose, write your story. It's going to help somebody. But I'm not brave enough yet to write. I think there's it's still. I mean, it happened such a long time ago, but to me, it's still quite raw. That those
Mm,
feelings of betrayal, I think, because, my mother knew what was going on and she never put a stop to it. So, and, she's still alive. So, that maybe when she passes, I might write it then. I don't know, but, we'll see.
hmm
But anyway, um, there is obviously it's therapy to write these things down, as you did. And, you got some release from that, so how can we process this trauma and gain the clarity that we need to be able to put the words on paper of the trauma that we experienced?
I saw a quote recently and it was randomly in someone else's book. And I smiled when I saw it. And I was like, that's perfect. A perfect way of explaining it, which is the best way to get ready to write a book is to write a book. Right. And I was like, oh, because, and I give you one example that we have someone in our program. Her name's Sonia. She's been with us since the company launched 2 years ago. She still hasn't published her book yet. She's still not even, she's like halfway through it now, but she's still not even towards the end of publishing a book. And on our average time frame is 3 to 6 months when someone joins our program to go from a blank page having a published book. And the reason why I bring Sonia up is because I think she's a beautiful example for people who are like, I don't even know how to write. I don't even know if I'm ready. Because one, you don't even need to publish the book if you don't want to. You can write the book for you. No one even needs to know about it. Right? The version of you now compared to the version of you who has written a book will be two very, very different people. And it's like, well, let that version of you make a decision on how you want to publish it, whether you want to or do it under a pseudonym or who knows. Now with Sonia, she joined, she wrote, and then about a year later, she came onto the call and then she took a bit of time away, like a month away, and she came back and she's like, I've literally torn up everything that I've written. I was like, interesting. Why? She goes, it just because the more that you write, because um I put onto I did a message in my community last week and I put it into my stories. Um I just want to read this out. I said, how long should it take for you to write your book? As long as it takes. Because it can be done fast, it can be done slow. And I consider that when you are writing, you're not working on the book, you're working on you. The book will be ready when you are ready.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
And
wise
with
words.
her, yeah. And that's again, that's what they showed me. Right. And
Hmm.
with her, she got to a point where she's like, I realized just with time of writing, that old lens started to disappear and this new lens started to come on. And she saw that what she'd been writing for the past year, she was writing from a place of pain and anger.
Hmm.
And here's the thing, that's okay because she had to go through a year of writing through pain and anger in order to see that she was living in a place of anger so she can start to correct that and heal those wounds. And now that she's writing from a completely different place and she's giving presentations at her work about her story that she never would have done when she was in that chapter of writing. So the best way for someone to don't get me wrong, there are some people who, if we're looking at a whole scale here of healing, we do have some people that are way over here in the place of pain, almost as if like it's happening now, even though it happened 20 years ago. And if they wrote, could it be quite harmful for them? Maybe it could be quite harmful for them, triggers and flashbacks and things of that nature. This is why I always say, have a therapist, have someone alongside you, a professional. Like we've got many people in our program whose therapists referred their patients and their clients to us, so that at least they have someone working with them with their sessions every week to bring them in and bring them out. But if we have people further along the journey where they're like, well, no, I'm not that much in the pain and I have enough self-awareness to know that, then I would say that the process of the writing itself, with taking imperfect action, will help you to become the person that can write the book.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think, you're quite right that, if you're writing from a place of anger and pain, the words that you're writing are a lot different than when you're coming from a place of healing.
Correct. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So how do we turn that pain into purpose, Perry?
I think it's other than going through like the witness effect that I said there, because the purpose at the end point is that legacy witnessing, which is then when you're able to see, because what happens throughout that is almost there's a transition of almost like a disconnect where you're not writing as if you're in the story. You're writing as in you are a viewer of the story. You're seeing yourself as a character in the story. So there's a slight disconnect. And I believe that's a healthy disconnect. When I share my story, I don't share it as if I am that boy that was abused almost. I share it as if, well, that was me, but that's almost a character in a film that I produced and launched many years ago type of thing. It's a disconnect. And I feel like you'll notice when you're able to have that disconnect because you're able to actually speak of your story about, you'll share your story, crying, breaking down, or whatever your nervous system wants to do, and then you'll start to share your story from a place of, okay, that's interesting, and you'll start to feel the disconnect. And I feel like that simply happens, the pain to purpose, one, when you start to confront your truth and you go through that witness effect, but then also when you find out what is the message of your story. For me, that's the biggest thing. As soon as you know what the message of your story is, for me, it's breaking generational silence. Um, for someone else, it's raising awareness on narcissistic abuse from partners. Whatever it is, you will have a message. And it's usually the message that the past version of you wanted to hear.
Mm.
So as soon as you know what the message is of your story, all of a sudden you start to find a purpose. And then if you can make the purpose greater than the fears, then you will do it anyway, despite the fears.
Mm. Yeah, it makes sense, but I think a lot of us, survivors of whether it's sexual abuse or domestic and family violence, find it maybe a little bit challenging to write down those things that have happened to us, because you write about the flashbacks and the bad memories, and you start having nightmares about these things, and am I writing down the right things, and am I going to hurt somebody, is someone going to sue me? There are all of those things to take into consideration. So how do we get past that?
You get past that by focusing on putting one step forward rather than, and because this is it, before someone's even putting pen to paper, they're already thinking about, am I going to get sued? Are they going to come out of prison? What is my mum going to think? I love her, but to be truthful, she could have protected me and she didn't. But am I going to break her heart when I put this book out? All of that, which is the open-ended questions of fears and anxieties, are all surrounding on post-publication of the book. Whereas, like, well, how about we make the end goal to have a final draft, not publishing? Because I've seen this so many times, and it happens every single time that these people prior to joining had these fears and it stopped them for 20, 30 years. They wanted to write a book, but all of the fears are still there. And then the mum passes away. That was the original fear, but then that fear gets swapped with something else. Well, what's my best friend Sally going to think now? Right? Or what's the priest in the local church going to think? Or like whatever it is, it's going to be a replacement of a fear. So it's like, well, just forget about the publication. You're not even going to publish the book. Forget about it, because it's too much for the current version of you. It's too much for you to handle. Because if it wasn't, you would have done it already. So instead, set your sights on, I'm going to get to the final draft, because it will be the most healing and most transformative process you'll ever go through in your entire life. And I can promise you that. Promise you. So at the very least, you owe that to yourself. So you go through the process, no matter how long it's going to take you. Once you've gotten to the end, cross that bridge when you get to it. Because when you're at that stage, you can then sit down with lawyers, and I can guarantee you that the version of you then sitting down with a lawyer will probably approach that situation differently compared to the version of you now sitting down with a lawyer, right? So there's a lot of things that you will do differently when you get to that bridge to
Yeah,
cross
no,
it.
Yeah, yeah, I understand all that. That makes perfect sense, I guess. But and so, once we get over those fears, what are some practical steps to actually start the writing process?
I the easiest thing to do for now for people who haven't written, because I could say, like the program that we have is very extensive with all the questions and all the modules that we have, and that's just too much. The information that will best serve the people right now listening who haven't written yet is to just word vomit on your laptop or on a piece of paper. Just word vomit. Word vomit your story. Doesn't matter where you start, doesn't matter where you end. Word vomit in one sitting, not in multiple sittings, one sitting, word vomit everything down until you feel like you've come to a natural end. And then maybe the next day or the following week or the following month, depending emotionally on how that's affected you, go back to that and expand on it. And just keep on expanding on it until you're like, because it will first the first stage will be this sort of release. And then once you've done the release, then it's about, okay, looking at what you just released, how can we then morph that into a story that can be an actual book? So it's the first stage, just word vomit your story and just, take all the barriers away and just write.
I think it's a bit like journaling. I suppose if you keep a journal, you could take all the stuff that you've put in your journal and put that into a book instead.
Mhm.
Usually people that journal write their deepest, darkest secrets in there.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And we have some people that do that. And also what you'll find is when that lens starts to change, when you start to transition from pain into the purpose, you start to see that a lot of the journal entries that one did came from a place of pain. And some of them might not want to include because of the energy that it carries. But then also, sometimes you do want to include it to show the reader that this was what it was like back then. This was the thoughts that you did have, so definitely serve a purpose.
Mm, absolutely. So, Perry, tell me a little bit about your program, a bit more about it. Where can people find it?
So, uh, the Powerful Books program is a community that we have. We have weekly group calls. You get an accountability partner, and you basically get like a full-on course with different trainings, different modules, step-by-step process to help you. We've got mindset things to begin with, overcoming family opinions, overcoming the self-critic, and then the next step is then going into writing your story. So how can we clarify your story? How can we figure out what the message of your story is? How can we create a book structure? And then you go into the drafting process where you actually start to. So as you notice, there's a lot of work that you do before you start writing the book. Because if you can create a plan before you start writing and then you start writing the book, you know exactly where you're going. And then when you get to the end and you basically have written a draft of your book, then you can make a decision. Some people do, some people don't. Whatever you want to just keep that because you did this for a healing journey, or you want to take the next step and turn that draft into a published book. And then there's an option to do that inside of Powerful Books because there's two ways to work with us basically, just our writing community, healing community, or the publishing program, which is like an upgrade. So we have that as an option. And then the best way to sort of check out more of what we do, two ways, is one, following me on Instagram. So it's I am Perry Power, and you can see all of our stuff on there. Or is going onto our website. And that's definitely a place worth visiting for everyone, which is bepowerfulmedia.com. So bepowerfulmedia.com. And on there you can see all of our stuff because we've got powerful books, we've got powerful films, we've got powerful merch. So we've got inspirational hoodies, we've got powerful news. Lots of our survivors are taking on this sort of position now of being bloggers and releasing articles, all based on their own individual messages. So it's like a news outlet platform. And yeah, it's just like a good one-stop hub. And there's powerful books information on there as well. And there's a link on there where you can join the community.
Cool. Perry, would
Yeah.
you like to share anything else with our audience today?
If anyone is living in silence, I say this in, so I've got a book out called Breaking the Silence, and that's one I published a few years ago. And the core message of that is for anyone who is living in silence, like if you're listening to this and you're living in silence about something that you've been through, it doesn't have to just be sexual abuse, it could be anything that you went through. And you are trying to decide how can you break the silence, and you heard my story when I said I broke my silence to my ex-girlfriend at the time. My recommendation is to don't do that, because I was lucky that my girlfriend welcomed me with open arms. I was lucky that she welcomed my truth. But if she rejected my truth, or she paused for a little bit too long, I would have read into that, and I would have associated her reaction as rejection. And now all of a sudden my story's been rejected by the very person that I loved and trusted the most, whether she meant to or not. And I would have now probably gone on to live in silence for the rest of my life. So my recommendation to people is, if you're living in silence, rather than making step 1, telling that person, make that maybe step 14. And the first 13 steps is you breaking the silence to yourself in as many different ways as you possibly can. Journaling, writing a short story, writing a poem, doing a piece of music, choreographing a dance piece, going to pottery class, making a bowl. And whilst you're making the bowl, you're transferring these emotions that you've had locked away into the bowl, because now you have a physical representation of you breaking your silence. No one else will know, but you will know. And the more times that you do that, the more times you're confronting your own truth, and you're slowly transitioning out of pain and slightly into purpose. And then the version of you telling that partner of yours on step 1 compared to step 14 will be very, very different people. So that is my recommendation. If you're living in silence, break the silence to yourself first in as many different ways as you can, and then to someone else.
Great advice. Love that. Absolutely love that. Perry, it has been an absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed our conversation immensely. Now, don't forget to go to Perry's website, bepowerfulmedia.com, and don't forget to check out his powerful book section, and you'll find his merch, and you'll find all about his program and everything on there. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Perry. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Rose. Thank you.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Healing Through Love. You can get further resources, see the show notes, or simply reach out to us via our website at htlaustralia.org. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to your company next time on the Healing Through Love podcast.